one God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. Billy was turning 6, and he decided long before he was turning 6 that he needed a dog. And so he had bugged his parents about getting a dog. And finally, after weeks of anticipation, they took him down to the Humane Society shelter where the lost and abandoned dogs were there to be adopted. And so he was wandering around among all those dogs, and there were lots of them there. And he looked over all of them very carefully. And he thought for a while, and then he pointed to this undistinguished-looking shaggy pup that was sitting there wagging his tail at him. And he said, "I want that one. And he said, the reason I want that one is I want to help that one have a happy ending." The gospel lesson this morning reads like this: "And Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering, be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed after 3 days and rise again." On this second Sunday of Lent, Jesus has turned his face toward Jerusalem and is trying to tell his disciples the purpose of his life is coming down to its end. And the disciples were not looking for suffering and death. They, like the little boy and his dog, were looking for a happy ending. It's clear from today's gospel that Peter is looking at his life with Jesus as a way to have a happy ending. When Andrew introduced Peter to Jesus, he does so by saying, "I have found the Messiah." And Peter is easily and rapidly convinced that Andrew is right about that. And so he joins the 12 with great anticipation. In the time of the New Testament, the Jews had developed a generally accepted view of what the future Messiah was supposed to look like. The whole concept of the Messiah represented for Israel a happy ending to all the troubles that they had experienced as a people. And it's not surprising then that the Messiah came to be seen as the one who would make things right for the Jewish people and restore Israel to its glory days. The way that Peter understands the term Messiah is very much in keeping with the same and common understanding of most of the people of his time and age where he lived. Peter then is not alone in his belief that the dream of a happy ending would come when Jesus used his power to overthrow the Roman rulers and restore the kingdom of Israel. He expected Jesus to become a king, and he and the other apostles would become his chief lieutenants in that kingdom. But Jesus had a different mission in mind than that. His Messiah would do something different. He would not be a king or a warrior. When Jesus tells Peter and the other disciples that the mission will take them to Jerusalem, where he will be tortured and executed, this is not the Messiah that Peter and the disciples signed up for. And so Peter tries to talk Jesus out of it, because he believes that Jesus has it all wrong. And from the background and history that Peter had, he was right about that. He had it all wrong compared to what the people of Israel thought were going to happen with the Messiah. Jesus defines discipleship differently, as a contrast between human values and God's values. Jesus' followers will emulate the Son of Man, who has given up his life for other people. According to human values, one's own life comes first. We might be the kind and generous person during the week, thoughtful toward others, but our priorities dictate that when our safety is in danger, our physical comfort comes first. We want to hang on to life as long as we possibly can. We don't want to give it up for somebody else. We don't want life to end, which is why when Jesus predicts his own end, Peter says, "Wait a minute, you got this wrong now. You got to hang around here, because if you go, who's going to save the rest of us? And so you have to save yourself in order to save us and improve our lives." Today's lesson is the first of 3 predictions in the Gospel of Matthew about Jesus' suffering rejection, and death. Each is followed by the disciples' failure to relate to Jesus and to get involved with his self-understanding of what the Messiah is about. They never did get it. The disciples never did get it in relation to this. Those who are closest to Jesus continually misunderstand his teaching and his true discipleship. The gospel message today is very clear. Anybody reading it can understand it. They simply, when the disciples read it or hear him say it, they don't want to understand it. The great American writer Mark Twain was a Bible reader. So must ask if you've read a lot of Mark Twain, I'm not sure he was a Bible reader, read some of his other things. But he really was a very strong man of faith. And he said that when he read the Bible, he was worried when he encountered straightforward passages like he got today. He puts it this way: it ain't those parts of the Bible that I can't understand that bother me. It's the parts that are so clearly written that I know exactly what it's saying to me, and I just don't want to do it. The disciples simply never understand this clear message from Jesus. But sometimes the saints among us do understand what Jesus is talking about. Early one morning, St. Francis of Assisi said to several of his followers, "Let's go in town from the monastery and preach today in the streets." And so as they went along, they met a weary pedestrian who was greatly burdened. And Francis stopped and talked to him and listened respectfully to him and heard his tale of woe and made arrangements to provide him for some assistance as he went on his way. And when the village was reached, Francis talked one-on-one with the shopkeepers, again listening respectfully and sharing in their joys and sorrows and identifying with their problems. And then Francis took time out to laugh and play with the children in the streets. And on the return trip, Francis and his party met a farmer who was struggling with a load of hay. Francis lent a hand to the farmer as he was able to go on his way. And it was almost dusk then as that whole day went past. And when they got back to the monastery, one of the brothers said, "Brother Francis, you said we were going to town to preach today. But there's no sermon has ever been given." And Francis replied, "Brother, we have been preaching all day long." In a book called A Light in the Attic, the authors worry about that issue that most of us have had at one time about what if. Some of you, if you're like me, have woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning at that bewitching hour, and all of a sudden the what ifs hit in the back of your mind. What if I, and I'm back to 1950 or somewhere, about what ifs. And so here's a little poem about the what ifs that the disciples are thinking as Jesus tells them about this not so good ending in their eyes. In a book called A Light in the Attic, the author writes, "Last night while I lay thinking here, some what ifs crawled inside my ear, and pranced and partied all night long, and sang their good old what if song. What if I'm dumb in school? What if they close the swimming pool? What if I get beat up? What if they poison my cup? What if I start to cry? What if I get sick and die? What if nobody likes me? What if a bolt of lightning strikes me? Everything seems so swell, and then the nighttime what ifs strike again." We can only imagine the list of what ifs that were going through the minds of Peter and the other disciples, and through the minds of the persons in the crowd who heard Jesus as he addressed them about his future. What if he's wrong? What if he's crazy? What if we follow him and he gets us nowhere? What if we follow him and get ourselves in trouble and the Romans get after us? What if? What if? What if? What if it all ends badly and there's no happy ending in this story? According to Mark's gospel, disciples represent human values in this passage. They aspire to power and greatness and assume that Jesus shares those values. Jesus represents God's values, best summed up by the willingness to risk one's own life for the sake of others. For those who want to save their life will lose it. Those who lose their life for my sake and the gospel will save it.